Okay, good evening. Welcome back after Yontov. Hope you had a lovely Yontov. And we're back on the Halacha Shir, the first slot for tonight. And this week's topic is when to say the bracha for the mikveh. We try and pick a topic which is related to the parsha. And this week, Parsha Shmini contains, of course, it starts with Vahi Bayom HaShmini, the inauguration of the Mishkan. And then it goes on and tells how the death of Nadav and Avihu, and then talks about kashrus. And at the end of the parsha, we talk about the halachas of tum and tahara, ritual purity. So this is a good connection to talking about this particular point, when to say the bracha for the mikveh. And it's an interesting topic because the question is, when do you make the bracha? What is the rule generally when it comes to brachas? So the rule is kol ha-mitzvahs mevarech alein over lasiyoson. Now that is based on the Gemara in Pesachim. So if you look at the first box, and if you're listening online, please email me at j.golka@gmail.com and I'll send you the handout. The Gemara in Pesachim Zayin on the base says, Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Rav Yehuda, Omer Shmuel, Kol ha-mitzvahs mevarech aleihen over lasiyoson. All mitzvahs, you make the bracha before you do them. Over as an expression of before in this situation. Chutz min ha-tefillah. So, with the exception of tefillah, which we'll talk about in a second, you make the bracha and then you do the action. So I made a bracha as I always do before I start the shir, and I made a bracha shehakol, and then I drink the drink. You take the apple, you make a berprates, and then you eat the apple. So that's the normal rule. Kol ha-mitzvahs mevarech aleihen over lasiyoson. I take my talis, and just before I wrap it around myself, I make the bracha, and then I do it, etc. Chutz min ha-tefillah, except for tefillah. Why? Says the Gemara, da kati gavra lechozi, because the person is not able to make the bracha. And Tani Namihachi, and we've got a brisa supporting this, Toval va'Allah, he dips and then he emerges, Baliyosai Omer, when he emerges from the mikveh, he says, Baruch HaShekichon Mitzvah V'Tzivonu al HaTvila. Now that's the starting point. Just by the way, there's a Machlekes Rashi Tesus, who we're talking about, this gentleman, Dakati Gavru Lechazi, is not able to make the bracha. So Rashi talks about a Balkeri, that is Tommy. Tesus says we're talking about the tefillah of a ger. He quotes Rabbeinu Chananel, B'Shem Hagan, Dafka b'tfilas ger, D'loi chazi kodem tefillah, D'loi motzi l'meim v'tzivonu, D'akati nochrihu. That the tefillah of a ger is still not Jewish, so he can't make the bracha beforehand, of course, because he's not yet Jewish. I've had the zuchus of being twice now with two gerim, who have converted, and I've had the privilege of being there at the time. It's an amazing experience. He comes in not Jewish. He's had Mila, he's had Makabel al mitzvahs, and he's being questioned by the Dayanim as he's sort of walking towards the mikveh. It's fascinating to watch. And then he goes in non-Jewish and he comes out Jewish and Mazel Tov, and it's a very powerful moment. But that's what Tosfos says what the Gemara is referring to. Now, the big question is, we understand what the general rule is, kol ha-mitzvahs over lasiyoson, you make the bracha, then you do the action, chutz min ha-tefillah. The question is it chutz min ha-tefillah of all tefillahs or only the ger? So that is a big discussion. So Tosfos, if you look at the second box, Tosfos there, Diba Maskal ala Tefillah, says that we're talking about the tefillah of a ger, Deloi motzi l'meima v'tzivonu dakati nochri, he's not Jewish, therefore he can't make the bracha. Avol shar chayvei tefillah, but other people who would go to the mikveh and make the bracha, could go in Balkeri, or a woman who goes to the mikveh, v'chiyetzi bay, mutar levarich, they would do it. They would make the bracha beforehand, and in fact that is how the Rif and the Rambam also say. The Rif says in the next line there, Mefarsh l'Rabbanan the tefillas ger bilvad, that who makes the bracha? When does the ger make he makes the bracha afterwards? That's specifically the ger. But in all other cases of tefillah, apart from the ger who cannot make the bracha before, he would actually follow the normal rules, i.e. he makes the bracha and then he's tovel. And the Rambam says the same thing in Hilchas Brachas in Perek Gedal of Halacha Zayin. Ein lecha mitzvah shemevarech achar hasiyosa ela tefillas hager bavad. The only time, the only exception to the rule is the tefillah of the ger. That's when he makes the bracha afterwards. She'eni yochel lema shekishon mitzvah v'tzivonu shadayin lo niskadish v'lo nistav ad sheyitbol. V'fichach achar sheyitbol mevarech ala tefillah mipnei hudach kedich meikar v'lo ero levarech, etc. But anybody else, any other, a woman who goes to the mikveh, according to the Rabbeinu Chananel, as quoted by Tosfos, according to the Rambam, according to the Rif, they would make the bracha and then they would dip, and the only exception is the ger. The Ri, however, quoted by this Tosfos, argues, and the Ri says, "Afal pikein omer Ri de'ein ligar benoshim shemevarachas achatvila, given the ikar tvilas gered lo motz levarach lo chilku," i.e., it's a low plug. So the Ri in Tosfos is of the opinion that everyone, all people who go to the mikvah, make the bracha afterwards, and we don't make any distinction when it comes to mikvah. So you have a very interesting machlekes. According to Rabbeinu Hananel, the Rambam and the Rif, only the ger makes the bracha afterwards, but anybody else going to the mikveh would make the bracha beforehand. A balkeri, a person, please God, when Mashiach comes and we all, eat kodshim again, and when anybody became Tomei would have to go to the mikveh, and women even nowadays, they, according to the Rabbeinu Hanan, the Ram and the Rif, they would make the bracha first, and then they would be tovel. The Ri, however, quoted by Tosfos, says it's a low plug, and all people who go to the mikveh make the bracha afterwards. How does the Shulchan Aruch paskin? So, sort of predictably perhaps, the Mechaber goes with the Rambam, and that view, the Rambam and the Rif, the Rabbeinu Hananel, and says, when she's standing in her robe, so she makes the bracha dressed in her robe, and then she would take it off and go to the mikveh, and she would dip. So according to the Mechaber, he follows the Rambam and the Rif, that a woman would make a bracha beforehand, and then she would dip, and the only exception is of course the ger. The Ramah, however, says there, it's in Yerodeh and Hilchos Nidin, Siman Reish, Sif Aleph, the Ramah says, V'yesh omrim, shaloi tevarech ad achar tvila, that she makes the bracha after she's tovel, after she dips. V'chein nagim shel achar tvila ba'odah emedes teichamayim, machisa atzim b'godah b'chaluka mevareches, she makes the bracha afterwards. So you've got the machlekas, the Rambam and the Rif, the Mechaber and the Ramah, as to what practice is, which is essentially a machlekas in practice between Ashkenazim and Sfardim. So Sfardim, women, let's say halacha l'maisa nowadays, would make the bracha before they go into the mikveh, and Ashkenazim would dip first and then make the bracha. Now it's interesting that the Aruch HaShulchan, he quotes all of this, and then he mentions the minhag of the shlo. So if you look at the next box on the next page, paragraph 4, Sif Gimel, he just summarizes essentially what I've just said, and then in Sif Dalet he says, Avar Rabbeinu HaRamah, he quotes the Mechaber in the previous Sif, and then he quotes the Ramah, Kosav Yesh Omrim Shelo Yisavarach Ad Achat Tvila. That Yesh Omrim, based of course on the Ri, is quoted by Tosfos, that you first go to the mikveh and then you make the bracha after the tefillah. V'da, says the Aruch HaShulchan, the noshim shelonu minhagon shetovlois pam achas. There are minhag nowadays for Ashkenazi women, says the Aruch HaShulchan, is that a woman would dip once, umavarches, and then make the bracha, va'achakach tovlois pam shenis, and then she would dip a second time, ubozeh yotzim kol hadeis. And now she's fulfilled all opinions. Shetzia bracha kodim atvila, va'achat tvila, u'minhag yafahu v'chein kosav b'shlo. So the Aruch HaShulchan says that the practice in Ashkenazi circles is, let's say nowadays, that a woman dips, then she makes the bracha, and then she dips again. And therefore, she has covered all bases, as it were, because she has, you've fulfilled the minhag, if you like, the precedent of the ger, because you dip first and then you make the bracha. But then she dips the second time, and therefore she has been mekuyim, if you like, the kol ha-mitzvahs mevarchin alein over lasi yoson. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says in the name of the shlo. Now, the Dogel Mervava, the Noda B'Yehuda, questions this practice. Let's go through the Dogel Mervava inside. It's very, very interesting. So it says the Dogel Mervava there in Yerodeh and Siman Reish. He says the following. This is the last box on the page. I don't understand the purpose of this minhag of dipping a second time. If it's to fulfill the opinion that you make the bracha before the tefillah, the second tefillah is nothing. You can't make a bracha on it because once she's been toveles, once she's dipped, she is tahira. You don't need to dip more than once, and therefore, bracha is ein ma'akev, and bracha is not ma'akev. If she didn't make a bracha beforehand, brachas are never ma'akev, and therefore, what's the purpose of this second dipping? It doesn't really work, says the Dogel Mervava. Noda B'Yehuda. Va'afilu im nitchek v'nifresh kavonas hagan shetechaven beferish b'tefila rishona. Maybe she has the kavona, she makes a t'nai. Be'im sha'adin noisen levarach kodim ha'tefila lo ya'ale lo tefila zu. That if the din is that you make the bracha first and then you toveles, so she makes a t'nai that the first tefila, the first dipping, won't count. It's just nothing. Vim kein shapim mevarach sal tefila shenis, and therefore she's actually doing she's making a bracha and then she's dipping in that order, and therefore she's mekayim the overlas yosa by making the bracha and the second tefillah counts. Gam bezeloi mahani. But that doesn't work, says the Noda B'Yehuda. The otu garua tefillah rishona min nida shetov lebeloi kavona klal. But at the end of the day, it's not about a performance of a mitzvah. With tefillah, once you've dipped, you've dipped. If a woman falls into a river, even if she didn't have kavana, she is tahor. So the Tanai is not going to help you. And therefore the Dogel Mervava questions this Tanai. He says it doesn't really work because once you've dipped, the Tumah is gone, and therefore you can make whatever Tanai you want, but the bracha is always going to be after that first dipping, so it's not going to be really considered Ma'ovelas Yosan. So be that as it may. Nonetheless, despite the objections of the Dogel Mervava, the contemporary practice is that not to make this Tanai, and the minhag in Ashkenazi circles is for a woman to dip twice, as per the Ramah, as per the Aruch HaShulchan, and therefore a woman would dip, an Ashkenazi woman, and then she would make the bracha, and then she would dip a second time. The Sephardim have a different practice. They follow, of course, the Machaba, and that is they make the bracha beforehand, as per the Shitta of the Rambam and the Rif, etc. So just to summarize what we've said this evening, that we are discussing when to say the bracha for the mikveh based on the connection to this week's parsha. At the end of the parsha, Parsha Shmini, we deal with the halachas of Tum and Tahara, ritual purity, and the discussion is when to say the bracha for the mikveh. The Gemara in Pesachim says, Kol ha-mitzvahs overlas yosan, you make the bracha, then you do the mitzvah, chutz min ha-tefillah. It's a machlokas what that means. Is it chutz min ha-tefillah of the ger only? That is how the Rambam, the Rabbeinu Chananel, and the Rif hold. The Ri, however, says it's low plugin, it's all types of tefillah, and therefore everyone makes the bracha afterwards. That machlekas is manifested in the machlekas Mechaba and the Ramah. The Mechaba follows predictably the shit of the Rambam and the Rif, and therefore it applies only to the ger, and therefore women would do the normal thing to make the bracha first and then go to the mikveh. The Ramah, however, says the Yesh Omrim, based on this Ri that Tosfos brings, that everyone makes the bracha afterwards, and that is the contemporary practice. The Aruch HaShulchan does quote the minhag of the Shlah, and therefore the Ashkenazi practice is for a woman to dip once, make the bracha, and then dip a second time. But in Sephardi circles, they would follow the Mechaba and to make the bracha first and then to be toveles.